Entonces, que el celular te resalta. Sí, no, so got it right. Okay, so we're good to go.
Can you put my video here so I can see myself?
Mm,
This one. Yeah.
yeah, this can't be just like a running bird. Let's see, the level is up. And you can't count me by anything.
When you scratch your head, you can see the video.
I don't think it's possible to return this.
Yeah, because you have to see
No,
the screen.
no, no, you're going to be here.
Google doesn't have this
Yeah. Okay.
functionality.
Maybe.
Put your finger there, see whether you can see. Okay. You're not kidding. Fine.
Okay,
That's fine. Yeah, okay.
so can start,
Yeah.
please.
Deixa
Acho que a gravação da tela é essa.
Acho que
Não sei.
tá. Ah, não sei se a gente vai conseguir fazer isso. Não.
Esses caras.
Ele quer se ver aqui essa câmera, né? Ver a câmera dele aqui, né? Mas eu não sei se vai ser possível.
Entrei para a tela cheia.
Né? Aqui. Acho que agora vai. Ok? Deixa eu diminuir um pouquinho aqui. Vamos. It's all right like that?
Yeah, but it's, I can see Bruno's face.
Really?
Yeah. You have to operate the slide coming. So, okay. Oh, no, I think it's okay. I will do this. I do the slide myself. Because otherwise, your face will keep appearing. So, to use the slides, press which one? This one? Okay. Okay.
Okay, okay, start. Okay, I will present for everybody. Mr. Leon Conselheiro, he is ele é palestrante mundial e também lá em Singapura ele tem algumas posições voltadas à parte de finanças e management, gestão. E o assunto vai ser a escala do sucesso econômico de Singapura, né? Principalmente como é que eles lidam com a produção. Então, ele acredita que parte do que eles têm lá de práticas pode ser usado no Brasil, e o Brasil melhorar mais rapidamente. Isso. Desafio.
The Singapore economic success and anti-corruption model, can it be adapted to Brazil? Singapore has the most top ranking in the world today. Number one for most competitive economy. Number one, global talent competitiveness. Number one, GDP per capita PPP. I will not go through the whole list, but the most important one is we are number one for innovation. Many countries have said that they want to be the next Singapore. To the best of my knowledge, only one country in Africa and one country in Central Asia has been able to adapt the model quite successfully in a big way. Of course, there are many small successes in many other countries. And my humble opinion is that the reason why most countries may not be able to adapt the Singapore model to greater extent is because I think too many countries tend to focus on the success of the model. We need to focus more on the mistakes, the setbacks, the lessons that Singapore went through in the 60 years to be where we are today. I think the problem, as I have spoken in more than 40 countries in the world, is that when leaders do something and it becomes very successful, people will say, oh, the leader or the leaders must be very brilliant. And often, even the leaders themselves believe that they were brilliant and that the brilliance resulted in the success. Right? But the real story always is there may be many other factors that contributed to the success.
Mais ou menos assim, que um dos sucessos que levou a Singapura ao sucesso é eles focarem também nos erros, não só as coisas boas, assim, aquele uma aprendizado que eles esperam da sociedade, os erros que eles cometeram. Esse é o livro.
The Singapore model has been described as the economic miracle in modern times. We are a small island, 744 square kilometers, 6.1 million population. But for such a small country, look at the numbers. Our stock of Singapore's direct investment abroad, DIA, by the corporate sector is $1.6 trillion. Now, all the dollars I show will be Singapore dollars, which is about $1 is about 1.3 Singapore dollar, and 100 Singapore dollars is about 400 Brazilian reals. So every time you see this, you times 4, that is Brazilian real. So if you look at this one, we have reserves of estimated to be more than $2 trillion. In other words, our reserves is more than 8 trillion Brazilian real. Let's look at why we are number one for innovation. R&D, research and development spending, average 2.2% of GDP, $13.8 billion. We are the top global spot for indicators like government effectiveness and FDI net influence. Our leading sectors are most patent active domestic fields in Singapore include computer technology, biotech, RNA-based diagnostics, clean energy. We are ranked number 2 in the world for international property rights. Unlike large countries like China, United States, and Japan, which have the highest number of patents, Singapore is the top tier performer when it comes to benchmarking for innovation quality. So we don't have quantity, but we are the best when it comes to quality. IP protection strength and patents relative to size. We are the 6th globally for international patent applications, PCT, per million inhabitants, 11 for total patent grants, 14 for most idea intensive nation, and foreign investment, more than 85% of the patent applications are filed by foreign entities, showing Singapore's attractiveness as an IP. Let's go back in time. I'm 72 years old now. Go back to the 70s and see how the innovation started in Singapore. In the 70s, every organization, company, government department would have a suggestion box. Okay? Every suggestion you put in, you get $5. I had a friend whose son, after graduating from university, went to work and submitted 50 suggestions in 1 year. And so 50 times 5, he received $250. But the suggestions were so good, his starting pay of $7,000 after 1 year was increased to $20,000. And he was given a very important post in that organization. In the 70s, we have quality circles, focus on innovation. Of course, this originated in Japan in 1962. Greeks will meet regularly to try to improve productivity, quality, safety through a structured bottom-up approach. In 2003, we launched what we call the Cut Waste Panel to gather public feedback on how to reduce wasteful practices, suggestions to eliminate inefficiency. And in the first year, we had more than 500 plus. I'll tell you something funny about productivity. I went to Germany to try to find out why Germany is invariably one of the most productive nations in the world for productivity. You know what I discovered? The secret is everybody in the company goes drinking on Friday night. I'm not kidding. Right? So, innovation sometimes is simple common sense. So now we fast forward to now. We just announced the budget in Singapore in February 2026. What are we doing now for innovation? We have established an innovation fund of 37 billion. It's about 1% of GDP for research, innovation, and enterprise. We have established a 2030 5-year plan. This is the one that I think only Singapore has done so far, and probably no other country. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, we are the only country that has spent one AI a lot of money to enable all the students in Singapore to access to the best AI. We also announced the budget, enterprise innovation scheme, 400% tax deduction or allowance, up to 400,000 of qualifying expenditure per activity per year. What does that mean? You have a company, you spend $100,000 on innovation. When you come to file your income tax, you only spend 100,000, you get to deduct 400,000. So it's an incentive to motivate everybody to try to focus on innovation. Another one, productivity solutions grant to improve productivity, automate existing processes through IT solutions and equipment. This one, government will pay up to 50% of the cost, but this is only applicable to SMEs, Singaporean small and medium-sized enterprises. Big foreign companies don't get this benefit. And up to 30,000 a year to improve business productivity. You must be wondering why the screen become this way, right? Okay, it is on purpose. I want to emphasize to you that Singapore is where it is today because we try very hard to be different. That's why I show you to you like this. See, innovation is not all about inventions or technological breakthrough or patents or rocket science. Sometimes it's simple sense. And I'll give you a few examples of some of the things that Singapore did differently. But what is more important is not doing things differently. It is doing things that have never been done before. And I want to show you some. One year we had a recession. And so we asked the companies, particularly the foreign companies, how can we help you? He said, oh, the pension contribution, the cost very high. He said, some way you can reduce it. We cut the pension contribution rate of 50% to 30%. No country in the world has, and I think can ever cut the contribution rate of pensions. Because I think you try that in any other country, there will be protests in the government will be out of the job. So we show the world time and again that we bend our back to try to help business. Another example, we had the recession. And so we asked the companies, how can we help you? So, oh, no business, right? So can we send our workers on leave? And then when we have business, they come back and we have no money to pay them, then we ask them to work with no pay. But of course, when we're able to pay them, we will bring them what we owe them. Guess what? Okay, to do. So you can see Singapore innovation success story. It's not about innovation, patents, rocket science. It is doing things that has never been done before to build our reputation, our credibility, so that, as you see today, every business, every MNC, everybody wants to come to Singapore to invest, to do business, to study, to work, visit as a tourist. Let me tell you another story about doing what nobody has done before. One year, we had a tourist who came to Singapore and was cheated by a merchant. Singapore Airlines flew the tourists back to Singapore in business class to appear in court to testify. That is the best advertisement to the whole world. That Singapore is the best place to visit tourists. And you know, for many years, Singapore Airlines SIA was ranked as the best airline in the world. Even today, we are encouraged continuing learning and innovation. We have a skills development fund many years ago. Now it's changed the name to Skills Future. We started with every Singaporean gets $500 a year, and then it became 4,000 a year. And now for people like me who are old, I haven't used mine. I have 8,000 to use. We go and learn one word. Another example of doing something that's never been done before. One year I was speaking at the OAS Organization United States General Assembly in I think it was either Caracas, Venezuela, or Fort Lauderdale University. Halfway in my presentation, I crumpled my presentation papers and I threw it at the audience. They thought it was a terrorist attack. And then I explained, why did I do that? I want to emphasize that Singapore is where it is today because we really try very, very hard to be different. Next, I'm going to tell you a bit about the history of how we try to be innovative. And you will see that in the beginning, it was full of mistakes, failures, setbacks. We had what we call 3 incubators. That means we had 3 companies whose mission was to build up startups, incubators. It didn't work. My classmate was the CEO of one of the incubators. It did not work. And then slowly we realized a top-down approach to innovation doesn't work. So if you look at Singapore's history, now we are #1 for innovation. But you look at in the early years, every ranking on creativity puts Singapore almost at the bottom of being the least creative managers in the world. You know, rankings done by Center for Creative Leadership in the US, we will rank very low. But today we are #1 for innovation because we learn from the mistakes that we made. What is no U-turn mindset? Our most famous entrepreneur called Sim Wong Hoo, who has passed away. He is famous because he invented the sound card. For those of you who are old enough, there was a time when every computer had his sound card, because that was the only thing in the computer that made the computer sound like a stereo sound. So he said Singapore has a big problem many years ago. He called it the no U-turn mindset. What is he talking about? You see, in Singapore, when you drive, you see a U-turn sign and then you turn. So he says this is wrong. What you must change your mindset is, as long as you don't see any sign, you can turn anywhere, anytime. So he was so famous. Slowly, the mindset, I think, especially of the civil service, began to change. Now, they try as far as possible, like, rules are set, but wherever possible, we will try to change them, or we allow exceptions or whatever. And so the rule today is try not to have too many rules and to be too rigid with the rules. This is the best recent example of innovation doing something that's never been done before. Taylor Swift came to Singapore to do a concert in 2024. So what is so special that it has never been done before? We struck a deal with Taylor Swift. She can only perform in Singapore and no other country in Asia. And so all the countries were angry, How can you do that? Nobody has done it before. But we did it. And what was the outcome? More than 12,000 people came. They spent more than 370 million US dollars. GDP grew, reputation grew. So, great example, right, of doing something that's never been done before. So, you look at the Singapore success story, you don't have famous brands like the Koreans, no Samsung, no LG, no Hyundai, nothing, right? So, we are moving to do things differently. Meaning, if other people have succeeded by building famous brands, it's very hard for a small country to compete and do the same thing, right? And so we don't do that. I will explain to you later when I show you a video. We use what I call the melting pot. Melting pot. When I helped to organize a venture capital forum some years ago, it was not surprising that all the VC speakers said, "Oh, most of the Singapore startups, they fail. The only successful ones were those that had foreign collaboration." And so today, if I'm asked what makes innovation so well in Singapore, is the melting pot, which I will explain later. Let's go back a bit on history. Singapore became independent in 1965, and we modeled after the Philippines. Because at that time, the Philippines was the poster boy of the best country in Southeast Asia for I spoke in the Philippines last weekend. Where is the Philippines today compared to Singapore? World. So what are we doing now on the region? Every other month or month, we have huge conferences and events in Singapore. I'll just show you one of them. Slingshot, your startup into the world through Singapore. So the last one we had, 6,300 startups from over 150 markets participated in Slingshot, with our top 60 global startups joining in Singapore to forge connections with industry experts and key ecosystem partners. There were 300 exhibitors from Singapore and beyond. It has been, hailed as Asia's most exciting tech startup event that brings together over 20,000 global innovators. Let me play the video for you. Okay, while we are getting the queue up,
I don't think it will.
so we have these events practically every month in Singapore, whether it's fintech or AI, 20,000 people, they come, we call you a melting pot because everybody comes, then they all talk, and then something happens. That's great, right? Because, okay, you can play the video.
No, proceed. Chegar comercial.
So today, people ask me what continues to make Singapore is the melting pot, right? Every month, every other month, 20,000 people come from all kinds of events, and things happen. It may happen not in Singapore, but much of it either happens in Singapore is connected to Singapore. So far, everything sounds great, right? Okay, but the key to economic success has a lot to do with corruption. Because if you don't slowly eradicate corruption, you can try to adapt the Singapore model, but it will not work as well as it did for Singapore. So next, I'm going to show you what we call Singapore's anti-corruption model that can be adapted to any country. But first, let's look at the corruption ranking. Singapore is ranked number 3 in the world. You know which country is ranked 107?
Brazil.
Okay, Brazil. Because corruption impedes investor and business conflicts. And that, in many countries, is the problem today. Because if people do not have confidence in coming to your country to invest in the business, the world, how do you compete and grow the economy compared to other countries? So, the Singapore anti-corruption model has 3 points. Point number 1. Before point number one, I mean, common sense, right? Every country must have an independent anti-corruption entity. The one in Singapore reports to the Prime Minister directly. Okay. But now the 3 points. Point number one, very easy to get caught. We have a phone line. Anyone can call or say, oh, I think this person is corrupt. Of course, if you maliciously, intentionally make a false allegation, you will get in trouble as well. So when I was young, you watch the television, there are all these advertisements, propaganda, report corruption, report corruption. We had a rumor of a son who reported his father. Point number two, the penalty must be very severe. Our first minister who was found corrupt, it was rumored that he was asked to hang himself. Anyway, he committed suicide. So we sent a message. Penalty very, very severe. Last year, a cabinet minister was sentenced to 12 months jail for corruption. And you know what was the corruption? Football tickets, theater tickets, cheap $100 wines. So if you add up all this corruption, it was not even 50,000 US dollars. And he was sentenced to 12 months. So we regularly remind people that corruption is very serious. If I give you $100 or you give me $100 or I take it from you, we both go to jail for 3 to 6 months. The report just came out yesterday. Last year, corruption cases in Singapore was an all-time historic low of only 68 cases. So in the whole of last year, we only prosecuted 68 cases of corruption, the lowest ever. The third point is a bit more difficult and takes a longer time. You see, in most countries, in the 40 countries that I've talked about this, civil servants cannot survive without corruption because the pay is very low. So what do? We talk to civil servants. What are your financial concerns and goals in life? Number one, oh, I'm afraid if I fall sick, then I have no money to go to the hospital. Okay, free healthcare for civil servants. Number two, oh, what if I cannot afford to send my children to school? Okay, very low cost education for children, not just for civil servants, but for everybody. Oh, I'm worried if I retire, I don't have money. Free pension for all civil servants. Lastly, oh, I need a house, a room, but okay, very low cost quantum housing, not just for civil servants, but for everybody else. Now, as you listen to me say this, you must be wondering, wouldn't it cost a lot of money to give all this? Right? As I'll show you later, at the end of the day, it didn't cost the government a lot of money because I was a civil servant before. Most of us were offered and converted to the same scheme that all the Singaporeans are under. Why? As a civil servant, I must work continuously until 55, get free healthcare and free pension. If I stop somewhere in the middle, I get nothing. So most of us converted to the system that we now have for all the citizens. The most important part of my presentation today will start now. Most people don't realize that, of course, some people say, oh, what is the secret to Singapore's economic success model? You see, our fiscal policy to provide public goods and services is conceptually very similar to the Islamic finance concept of the sharing economy. That arguably is the secret to our success. Before I explain that to you, let me give you an example of what's happening in the world today. Many countries today have a big problem. Let's take the United Kingdom as the best example. You want to win votes, you promise more benefits. Then you become the government. To provide more benefits, you need to increase taxes. Oh, cannot, right? So then what you try to do, you cut benefits, even worse. So what happens is your budget deficit get higher, your external public debt get higher. There's no end. Most countries are in that situation. So what is this concept of the Islamic finance concept, the sharing economy? Sharing economy simply means sharing of the benefit and the risk between the stakeholders. So in the case of a nation, it's the sharing between the people and the state. Let me give you some examples. Every country has a public housing problem. Every city has a public housing problem. Why? Because every public house, the state builds, they lose money. In the Singapore public housing model, every public house the state builds, they don't lose money. How does it work? People who can afford and want to will buy a bigger public house flat in a more popular area. And the excess cash flows can then be used to enable the very poor, the very low income to have public flats as well at very low cost. The cheapest public flat in Singapore, the smallest one in the most unpopular area is about 100,000 Singapore dollars. But if you are very low income, very poor, household income below $1,500, they give you the flat at about as little as $10,000. That is a 90% subsidy or discount for poor people. And so we won the UN Habitat Award, one of the best public housing system in the world, because 80% of the population lives in public housing. And of this 80%, more than 80% actually own their public flats, which historically has increased in value by about 5% per annum. So it's just not a place to live, it's an investment. It grows with it. Let me give you another example. Healthcare. In Singapore, you go to the public hospital, you can choose. You want a room to yourself, 2 to a room, 4 to a room, or 6 to a room. If you choose the one that you pay more, you can choose your own doctor. If you choose the one you pay the least, you cannot choose a doctor. The computer will assign for you randomly. If you choose the one you pay more, you have priority for tests. X-ray, lab test. Yours is faster than the one who pay less. But of course, it's an emergency. Everybody gets the treatment at the same time. So same thing like public housing. Those who can afford and want to pay the excess cash flow so that everybody, including the poor and the bottom, can have almost what we call quality universal healthcare. So in Singapore, you're very poor, no problem. You make sure you go to the lowest 6 to a room ward. And if you're really very, very poor, the subsidy can be 100%. And you can actually end up not paying anything at all. But they do what we call means testing. They look at what assets you have as an income and as well. The price of being the economic miracle. We are ranked as the most tired, fatigued nation in the world. Do I look very tired? We are the most depressed nation in Asia. Do I look very depressed? We are 149 out of 157 countries in the Oxfam Inequality Index. So you see, economic success is a miracle, but we have our problems. We are now the 4th lowest birth rate in the world, and so on. Singapore is the most expensive city in the world today. Cost of living, huge problem. Okay. Iran war, cost of living, that's gone up. But I will show you one example of what apparently is the best ranking in the share rental one. And that is the individual ranking. Singapore is ranked second from the bottom for libido. So why is it a very good ranking? How do you measure libido? You ask people, right? So how often you have to be in sex? How you rate your performance? How your partner rate your performance? And so on, right? And because Singaporeans are very honest people, they tell the truth. That's why they rank so low. But it's a very good ranking because if you go to a country to invest and do business, to work or receive study as a tourist, you want the people to be honest, right? So very good ranking, not a fair one. So you can see, as I explained to you, the sharing economy concept enables the state to don't have to spend a lot of money on providing public goods and services like healthcare, pensions, and public housing. So if I put it another way, in most countries today, the burden of providing public services rests the state. In the Singapore model, the burden is shared between the people and the state. And so, if the state does not have to spend a lot of money on providing public goods and services, it has a lot of extra money that it can use for operation, compete in the world, new infrastructure, and so on. So if you track the cash flows for, say, public housing, healthcare, or pensions, almost every year, the inflows to the system actually is most of the time more than the outflows. See? So this is wonderful, right? You imagine any city, any state, or any government, we provide very good public goods and services, but actually we spend very little money because we collect more than what. This is the Singapore model. So we have the highest reserves per capita in the world today. Last year, we had the highest budget surplus ever of 15.7 billion dollars. That's about 62 billion we are surplus in just 1 year. Right? So imagine what we can do to maintain our position as number one for the nation and continue to charge ahead for all the other indicators that we have. We have huge budget surpluses. Normally, every 4 or 5 years, we have budget surplus. Pensions. Every Singaporean who works contribute a percentage of his salary, his own pension fund. The state collects all this money, they invest it. Then they pay everyone a fixed interest, no risk. Most of the time, what the state gets when it invests is a bit more than what they pay to the people. So the difference they keep and the difference now a year is estimated to be $10+ billion. And over the years, the accumulation must have gone to a few $100 billion. So this shows you why Singapore has so much money. Because even for pensions, the state doesn't have to spend any money. It's our own money. And even today now, the other thing we are doing is we have sovereign wealth fund. So the sovereign wealth fund is actually inviting people to invest through their subsidiary fund manager, and then they pay maybe 5% a year. It's guaranteed by the sovereign wealth fund. AAA rating for Singapore, and then if they get 6, they pay you 5, they keep 1. So every country I go, I say I was in the Philippines. I say, hey, I heard we just launched a sovereign wealth fund, so it's going to work, right? The problem in many countries today is one word: trust. People in Singapore love to invest through the subsidiary fund manager of the sovereign wealth trust. In many countries like those, no, I'm not giving money to the government. They might No, no. You know, I was speaking the Philippines last weekend, I told you. They had floods, very big floods in the Philippines last year. And then they discovered US $2 billion that was used for flood infrastructure spending disappeared. If not for the flood, nobody will know. Household trust. Okay, I mentioned corruption. I mentioned Islamic finance concept of the sharing economy. Very important key to the Singapore economic success story is TRUST. Because without trust, nobody will agree with the state to follow the kind of model that I just described. So, take any country in the world. If they have a national pension system like Singapore, and they just keep half of the cent of the you got a lot of money, right? Because Singapore has 6 billion people. Imagine those countries with 50, 100 million people, how much the half of the cent can amount to? Not just 10 over billion, much, much. I will explain to you how the public housing model works, but just to add on to this, the mission, the goal in Singapore is that every family, no matter how poor, will be able to own their own public house. Everyone. Today we are at 80%, we are still going up. And for those who cannot even afford to buy a public housing with a 90% discount price, they can rent public housing at 101 zillion riyal a month in the most expensive city in 101 zillion riyal. It's the equivalent of maybe 6 Singapore dollars. That is the cheapest public rental. But only very poor families qualify. They test your income, see whether your income must be less than, to start off, your income household less than $1,500 in order to qualify for this very low cost rental flat. So we try to, like we say in the army, leave no one behind. Right. In this model, there's a place for the very poor, there's a place for the very rich. So, in conclusion, I'm often asked, is it very difficult to adapt the Singapore model, especially in a very big country like Brazil? My answer is this: the bigger the country, maybe the easier. Why? You just pick one small city or small state and you try it. If it doesn't work, what's the problem, right? In a small country, you try it, don't work, then big problem for the government. Now, in many countries I said, well, we think you can try to adapt the model. Often the answer I get is no, I don't think so. Because the problem of political will. Politicians don't like to try new things that they never done before. So I will end by saying this. Any government that can adapt the Singapore model well will stay in power forever. The Singapore Party has been in power for 60 years since independence. It has about 90% of the seats in parliament. In last year's election, they won more than 70% of the votes. So, what's the problem? Political. Thank you very much. Now I think we're happy to ask questions.
Well, I'd like to hear a bit more on how Singapore attracts new companies. There was a slide when you talked about intellectual property. Can you tell us a bit more on why is it about taxes? There is this corruption model, transparency, that we see.
In the early years, nobody wants to come to Singapore to invest. Nobody wants to come to Singapore to start a business. because we are a small island, 700 square kilometers. We just got kicked out of Malaysia in 1965, and the British left us in 1975. So we have no natural resources. We have nothing. So in the beginning, we did other things. If you invest in Singapore, I think it was something like no tax for like 10 years. And then the land can be given to you free for like 30 years. You can bring in as many of your foreign workers as you like. So we simply try very hard to ask the companies that you are asking, what do you want? How can we help you? Then, there's not been a strike in Singapore for more than 40 years. Because if there is some argument going on between the workers and the company, the state will step in and say, no, you better solve this problem, right? Because every time you read the news that the strike of France or UK, it affects economic development. You ask anyone today, you want to go to the Middle East to invest, to do business, to study? No way. Why? You run for. You want to go to UK, go to France. France is a perfect one. Every other week there's a strike. And so every single citizen, what we do or don't do affects the future of the country. As John F. Kennedy said famously in his speech, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So the propaganda in Singapore has come to the stage where everybody tries to work together. Let me give you a more practical example of what we do today. Because I think the key is today and not to the beginning. Let's say the state wants to, or a government authority wants to have a new rules, or they want to bring a significant change to a rule. So the ideal process is they set up a consultation 3 months. They ask people, what do you think the new rules should be like? What do you think the change should be like? After 3 months, they decide on the new regulations. They announce it, another 3-month consultation. What do you think of the rules that we have decided to implement? And then they implement the rules, another 3 months of consultation. What do you think of the rules now that we have implemented it? So this is the ideal situation. It doesn't happen for every public entity or every regulation. But this is the ideal one. And it works very well. Because the companies love this. Because during these 3 months, they can say, oh, I don't like this, I like this, can you do this? That's why they are so successful. That's the question is in attracting companies, investment to Singapore. Thank you for that question. Next question.
Yeah. So thank you for your presentation. So let's know a little bit more about Singapore. But the question is how to build this trust to make the companies want to come to Singapore. Because you said that you were talking about that things in other countries, they always talk about the things, how to change the politics. And here in Brazil, I think it's all about politics. And I think it's a long way to change the things to avoid corruption. But you are very expecting the topic. How could you do here in Brazil?
Let me answer your question in 2 parts. First, I will talk about CBA because Bruno, who co-authored a book with me that has just been published, is available ebook and print book at Barnes&Noble. The Singapore Economic Success Model and Anti-Corruption Model can be adapted to Brazil. So, CBA, if I can take it as a representation of what Brazil is as a whole, and also politically. You are sitting on a gold mine. I visited all your labs. I met all your people. You're sitting on a gold mine because it's such a great story, right? I can go to any company in the world and say, hey, whatever product you have, because of all this wonderful research we have done, all the natural things of the Amazon environment, we can help you to make it different, make it better. You can increase the price and make more money. You want to try? Okay. So to answer your question in the wider context, government, you know, government are most afraid of. You had a change in government recently, right? Governments don't like they have to be kicked out. So I said earlier, you try the Singapore model, it works. You get to stay in power forever, like Singapore. And it's not so difficult to try. You find a small place, small city, small state. Don't try everything that I've taught. Just pick one and try it. What have you got to lose? If it works, then you can expand it. And then after a while, you're at the Singapore government. No need to go for election. We say sure win. 70% of the votes, 90% of the seats. Plus, as our founding prime minister said very famously, we don't need Western human rights because we have economic development. And when you have economic and social development, politics is not a problem. People will keep voting for you if you stay in power forever. I hope that helps to answer your question.
It's not so easy to necessarily change the income.
Let me just I will not name the country, but I'm working in one country now
Okay.
on how to eradicate corruption. And it's the power of AI and the power of influencers and the power of social media. We are doing what we call the social sanction. Okay. In this country, the AI can find who are the corrupt people. Even they are hiding in another country, like Philippines, they just found the one who is involved in the 2 billion they found in the Eastern Europe. The AI can find. Not only that, the AI can list from the time you started work until today, all the corruption, how much, where, and what for you. And then here's where the social sanction comes in. This corrupt person and his family cannot go to any restaurant to eat. No way. If the restaurant owner serves him or his family, everybody will boycott the restaurant will close down. This is the power of the social sanction. So I hope many countries will start doing this. And then people who are corrupt will think 10 times, oh no. What's the point of having all this money? As one very famous head of state said publicly on live TV, I cannot even go to the hairdresser. I'm a head of state. I cannot even go to the hairdresser. And of course, you cannot go to the restaurant also. Right? So I'm very hopeful corruption in many countries will go away faster than before. Thanks to AI, thanks to social sanction, thanks to social media. Next question.
I have one, it's not about specific about corruption, but at the beginning of your presentation, you presented a good point about the fact of Singapore in the quality of the research and the innovation. You have an insight about how Singapore attracts the foreign researchers or don't produce a lot, but has a lot of impact in the world that they can produce.
The youngest person here at 23 years old, as usual, the young people are the future and they ask the best question. I thank you very much. Those are the questions you said. You go back to it's to do with schools, universities, and so on. The traditional model, when you go to university, is you study a specialized subject, right? It's chemical engineering, or it's computer science. Now the world has changed. Now the trend is no point having specialization anymore. The AI will will kill 30% of jobs and undermine other 10%. So today, the focus is what we call interdisciplinary studies. You study all kinds of nonsense, right? Because they realize the artist who knows nothing about business can come up with the best idea to save a company that's going to die. And you can go to history, you can see many of these examples. So the focus today in Singapore, whether in the school, the university, the companies, is this. Number one, I don't care what you do, I want you to answer 2 questions. What is the impact? What is the outcome? It's pointless, universities producing thousands of theses, dissertations, projects, research papers. What is the impact? What is the outcome? And then we follow with 2 more questions. Is it something that's different from what's done today? Is it something that has never been done before? I think if everyone, whether in the school, the university, the research lab, goes through these 4 questions every day, you will get results. You will get innovation. So actually, I will share a new initiative that's been proposed to Singapore. Now in Singapore, just like CBA, we used to build big buildings like this, Then we have lab 1, lab 2, lab 3, right? In Singapore, a new initiative. We put the students, the startups, and the companies all together in containers. Shipping containers? We put them all together. Because we realize that this melting pot is not just the international people coming in. When you mix the student, the startup, and the companies together, things will start to happen. And the best part is containers are very cheap. For one building like this, there have been millions of containers, right? So this is a new initiative, but I want to be honest with you. Okay. We are still struggling with mistakes that we are making today. We are facing obstacles. We are having setbacks. In my view, we are not learning some of the lessons that we should be learning today. Although I thought I think Singapore is the miracle, but it's a continuing process. That's why I say it's a new initiative. We hope that this will take off in a big way. Because my friend, very famous architect, he's very keen. He says, once you do this, things will happen. Wonderful things will happen. The unexpected one. Let me share with you why in history the unexpected and the accident sometimes contributes to success. And I'll set you one example. Singapore is the number 3 financial center in the world. We beat Hong Kong, we beat Tokyo. Of course, you read the